bit of a Star Wars reading kick right now, and I would love some suggestions. This all started because I wanted to read more, but I didn't know what I wanted to read, and then I watched The Acolyte and absolutely fell in love with it and wanted to know more about the High Republic era, so I started reading the High Republic books. So far, I've gotten through Light of the Jedi, which, being honest, I didn't love. I thought that the writing was just kind of weird and not really for me in this one. I've also read Into the Dark, which I liked a lot more, though I wasn't like blown away by anything in here. I thought that the plot of this was very Star Trek TOS, but I did really like the characters that were built in this. Most recently, last week, I read my first ever Legends book, which was Heir to the Empire. I don't have it physically, but this is what the cover looks like. I really enjoyed this book. I thought the writing was nice and succinct. I got through it really quickly, and I don't know, it was just a good time. I don't really have anything critical to say about it. But now's where you come in. I need suggestions about what to read next. I'm truly down to read anything. I would like to keep it to books though. I don't want to get into the comics just yet. Few contenders. I have 2 physical books that I haven't read yet. The first one I have is Star Wars Before the Awakening. From what I understand, this book is about Rey, Finn, and Poe before the events of Force Awakens. Other option for a book I have presently is Empire Strikes Back from Another Point of View. I think I could get through this pretty quickly. They're strong contenders right now. I'm really wanting to read the Plagueis books. I have no reference for Darth Plagueis, and I'm along the same lines with Darth Revan. Is Revan from one of the games, or are they from one of the books? I don't remember. Anyways, another option is to go straight through with the High Republic. I believe the next book I need is one of the middle grades books. I think I want to save that for when I have a plane ride, because that seems like a book that I can travel with. While we're on the topic, if you would like to follow along with me, I've been posting my reading updates on Instagram, kind of, but more on Fable. If you're unfamiliar, Fable is reading tracker mesh between Goodreads and Storygraph. That was all. Feel free to leave any suggestions that you have or your favorite Star Wars book in the comments. I would love to get a list going of which ones are need to reads. Earlier in the week, I asked you guys to give me some Star Wars book suggestions, and you gave me quite a few, so I thought it'd be fun if we could make a game out of this. I want to read as many of your suggestions as possible, but I have no idea where to start, so I figured we could make it random. The wheel currently consists of every response that I got from my first video asking for suggestions, everything that I got from my Rogue One book video, and just some random ones that I've thrown in. Some of these books are on here twice because I got more than one comment suggesting that I read it. Here is what is currently on the wheel. Republic Manda series, Yoda, Dark Rendezvous, Shadow Point, Darth Bane, Legends and Plagueis, Legends, Revenge of the Sith, Master and Apprentice, specifically the audiobook. The Princess and the Scoundrel, the first Throne book, also specifically the audiobook version. Rise of the Red Blade, Leia, Princess of Alderaan, Bloodline, Catalyst, Lord of the Sith, A New Dawn, Master and Apprentice, Thrawn Ascendancy, Dawn of the Jedi, Dark Disciple, Rise of the Red Blade, Aftermath Trilogy, the Bane Trilogy, From Legends, Plagueis from Legends, From a Certain Point of View, ESP from a Certain Point of View, ROJ from a Certain Point of View, Bloodlines, Dark Disciple, Brotherhood, Heir to the Empire Book 2, Padme Trilogy, Republic Manda series, anything by Karen Travis, the Darth Bane Trilogy from Legends, Lost Star, Dark Disciple, Death Troopers, The Courtship of Princess Leia, which is a Legends book, Pax Fire, The Living Force, Ronin, Mace Windu, The Glass Abyss, the Phasma book, and whatever the next High Republic book that I haven't read is. So, if you didn't hear a book that you think I should read, or if you did and you want to second it, feel free to leave a comment, and I think that we'll start this sometime next week. I'm really excited about it. And also, let me know if you would be interested in a little book club. Fable, the app that I'm using to track all of my books for this year, they have a book club feature, which I've been playing around a little bit with, and it looks pretty fun. So if you'd like to follow along with me while I go on this reading adventure, feel free to press follow, and I will see you when we spin the wheel for the first time. Bye! It's time! Last week I asked TikTok to send in their Star Wars book recommendations, and I got close to 50 of them. I added them all to this wheel, and today is the first day we're going to spin for our random Star Wars book. If you'd like a refresher on what is currently on the wheel, you can check out my last Star Wars video. Let's spin the wheel. The first book we are reading is the first book of the Padme trilogy. The first book in this series is called Queen's Shadow. It is by E.K. Johnston. Here is the description. When Padme Nabiri, Queen Amidala of Naboo, steps down from her position, she is asked by the newly elected queen to become Naboo's representative in the Galactic Senate. Padme is unsure about taking on the new role, but cannot turn down a request to serve her people. Together with her most loyal handmaids, Padme must figure out how to navigate the treacherous waters of politics, forge a new identity beyond the Queen's Shadow. Queen's Shadow will be our first book. If you're interested in reading along, I will be chronicling my journey on Fable. I'm going to set up a little book club where you can read at your own pace. I'll also be chronicling my journey on Instagram stories if you'd like to follow me there. Bye! I just finished our first random book from the book wheel. Let's talk about it. If this is the first time you're hearing about this, I recently asked TikTok for its Star Wars book suggestions. I got a ton, so I put them on a random wheel and started a little book club over on Fable, and we will be slowly making our way through all of the recommended books, of course in a random order. I feel like this is really distracting, so I'm going to take it out, but look how cool this bookmark is. The first book that we rolled was the first book in the Padme trilogy, which is called Queen's Shadow. This book is by E.K. Johnston, who you may know as the author of Ahsoka, and it follows Padme as she goes through her transition from being Queen of Naboo to becoming one of its senators. I went into this book with zero expectations and zero background knowledge, and with that, I had a pretty good time reading this. This book obviously follows Padme, but it also follows the people who we have seen surrounding her, her handmaidens, and her security people. And I thought that it was really cool to get a deeper look into these characters that we didn't hear basically anything about in the prequels. I will say I thought that there were several points in this book that dragged. I think that it was kind of slow at points. I found myself not really interested in the sections that were focusing purely on one of the handmaidens. I just couldn't really get myself to care as much about what the handmaidens were doing as what Padme was doing in this one. One thing that I did really like about this book is how much politics we got. That probably sounds super boring to most people. I really like the politics of Star Wars. Another thing I really liked about this book is that we got some characters that we already knew, specifically spoilers. If you want to read this book or if you want to avoid spoilers, save this for later and then come back when you're done. 3, 2, 1. A part of this book where we were introduced to Bail Organa and Mon Mothma, I was so into because I love both of those characters. To be able to have this and help it fill in their timelines was really, really cool. Another character we see in this book, for better or worse, is Senator Clovis, if you remember him at all from that one Clone Wars arc. And I had completely forgotten about him, so when we first see him in the book, I was like, why does this guy seem so familiar? And then it clicked that it's that guy that we all hate. TLDR for all of this is that I think that this book did a good job of setting up the next 2 installments, but as a standalone, it was a little bit slow, it was a little bit boring at times. I couldn't get myself to care about a lot of the side characters, but it was also short and it wasn't an offensive read. The final rating for this was a 3.5. It was, in my opinion, completely average, nothing to write home about, but I am excited to continue the series. I do want to add here at the end, this is an actual, huge spoiler. The last chapter of this, Padme is not in because she's gone. It's her funeral in the last chapter of this book. So I'm not sure whether this was meant to be a standalone and then they did 2 more, or if this was always meant to be a trilogy and it was just kind of a flash forward, just in case we all forgot that she's gone. Honestly, probably my favorite part of the book. It felt new and unexpected. We will be spinning for our next random book very soon, so if you want to read along, you can join me on Fable, where I've set up a little book club. You can read at your own pace and take your time. I'm going to give a little less than a month for each book, but there's an archive where you can go back and see all of the previous discussions and still add your own thoughts as you read at your own pace. That is it for Queen's Shadow. I will see you when we spin for our next book. Bye! It's once again time to spin for a random Star Wars book. If you haven't seen me before, my name is Sunny, and a couple months ago I asked TikTok for its Star Wars book recommendations. I made this random wheel with all of them, and now we are doing a random book club. If you want to read along, you can head over to my Fable, that's where the book club is. I have inverted, which means it's time to spin. Next book is Shatterpoint. This is the Legends Mace Windu book. Here is the little blurb. In this essential Star Wars Legends novel, Mace Windu must journey to his long-forgotten homeworld to confront a terrifying mystery with dire personal consequences. The jungle planet of Harun Kal, homeworld to the legendary Jedi Master Mace Windu, has become a battleground in increasing hostilities between the Republic and the renegade separatist movement. The Jedi Council has sent Deba Palavo, Mace Windu's former Padawan and fellow council member, to Harun Kal to train the local tribesmen as a guerrilla resistance force. But now, the separatists have pulled back and Deba has not returned. The only clue to her disappearance is a cryptic recording left at the scene of a brutal massacre, a recording that hints of a madness and murder and the darkness in the jungle, a recording in Deba's own voice. Mace Windu trained Deba. Only he can find her. Only he can learn what has changed her. Only he can stop her. He will leave behind the Republic he serves, the civilization he believes in, everything but his passion for peace and his devotion to his former Padawan. He will learn the terrible price that must be paid when the keepers of peace are forced to make war. Oh, okay. This book is by Matthew Stover. It is the first Clone Wars novel, and it will become our first Legends book. By that synopsis, I'm very intrigued. If you want to read along, you can find the book club on my Fable, which I will post in the comments. See you soon. Bye! I just finished our second random Star Wars book, so let's talk about Shatterpoint. Really quickly, if I don't look familiar to you, my name is Sunny, and I recently got a bunch of Star Wars book recommendations, and I made a random wheel where I have been spinning and reading whatever book I land on. If you're reading along, you can find the book club on Fable. I'm going to attempt to keep this relatively spoiler-free, but if you're really concerned about getting spoilers for Shatterpoint, save this video and come back to it when you're done reading. I am at a little bit of a crossroads. I'm looking at this book and I see the author, Matthew Stover, also wrote the Revenge of the Sith novelization, which I have heard nothing but good things about. I also heard nothing but good things about this book, and if I'm being completely honest, I hated this. Every single page of this book I wish to be reading literally anything else. There were so many points where I had to force myself to continue getting through this book. It is almost 450 pages. It's a dense guy. This book came out in 2003, which was before Revenge of the Sith, so everything in this book is pre-Clone Wars TV show, post Attack of the Clones. The TLDR is that Depa Billaba, who is Mace Windu's former Padawan, also Kanan Jarrus's master, but Kanan didn't exist yet, so forget about that. Depa is sent to Harrenhal to train the local tribesmen in a guerrilla fighting militia. Harrenhal, of course, being Mace Windu's homeworld. And while she's off on this mission from the council, they get word that the Separatist army has pulled out of Harrenhal, but Depa has gone missing and Mace has to go find her. With that description, that's all on the back of the book. I was really expecting more of Depa and Mace together, and there is practically none of that. I hate what this book did to both Depa and Mace's characters. I don't think either of them were done justice with this narrative. I also think that this book was just trying to be gritty for the sake of being gritty and violent. Up until maybe 100 pages left in this book, it really felt like a one step forward, two steps back situation where we would get a little bit of information about where Depa was and Mace would get a little bit closer to her. But then there would be some random fight scene that was just entirely too long. I'm usually not the person that leans away from like gory or violent things. It usually doesn't faze me that much. But this was just so unexpected and not in a good way. And I understand that Mace Windu is supposed to be our like dark and gritty Jedi. He's got the purple lightsaber. But the person in this book, not my Mace Windu. At the end of the day, I wanted this book to be something that it's not, and that's partially on me. I wanted this book to be Mace rescuing Depa from a bad situation, or him finding her in a less than optimal circumstance and helping her get out from it. And instead, what this book is very dark, very violent, something that I would recommend if you want to read, look up content warnings for and understand what you're getting into before you start this. There were a few times where I was shocked from the content in this book, whether that be description of injury, mentions of SA and self-harm, and that's what I thought of Shatterpoint. I would love to know your opinion. If you read this book when it came out, please tell me your thoughts on it and what you thought before you had the knowledge of Revenge of the Sith and all of the other Clone Wars content. I'm genuinely very interested to hear if this book was well received at the time that it was released and like brand new. If you'd like more Star Wars book content, don't forget to follow, and I will see you tomorrow when we spin for our next random book. Bye! It is time once again to spin for our next random Star Wars book, so let's spin the wheel. If you haven't seen my glorious wheel before, my name is Sunny, and recently I got a ton of Star Wars book recommendations from TikTok, and I decided to make a little game out of it, put them all on this wheel. I've been spinning them randomly and reading them in a book club, which you can find the link for in the comments if you're interested. With that, let me pop the inverted filter on and spin the wheel. Here we go. The first book of the Aftermath trilogy. Here is the wiki summary. Aftermath is a canon novel by Chuck Wendig and published by Del Rey that is set between Star Wars Episode 6, Return of the Jedi, and Star Wars Episode 7, The Force Awakens. This novel is the first in the Star Wars Aftermath trilogy and is part of the Journey to Star Wars, The Force Awakens publishing project. I did not know that this was a Force Awakens book. That's interesting. Aftermath sees the beginning of a new government in the wake of the Empire's lost in the Battle of Endor and features at least one fan favorite character from the Star Wars films. Okay. It was released on September 4th, 2015. Ooh, and the audiobook is performed by Mark Thompson. I love him. Actually picked this one up from a secondhand store last week, so I'm super excited to be getting into this so quickly. If you would like to read along, you can find the link to my book club in the comments, and I will see you after I'm done reading. Bye! I just finished our third book from my random Star Wars book wheel. Let's talk about it. Really quickly, if you haven't seen me before, my name is Sunny and I have a Star Wars book club where we have been spinning a randomized wheel and letting it choose the book that we read. Our third book on the wheel was Star Wars Aftermath by Chuck Wendig, and I have a few thoughts about this. I really love this era in Star Wars. The month to year-ish after the Empire fell, I think is so vastly interesting in how there were still remnants of the Empire that was trying to regain power, and while the New Republic was trying to set up and all the other little factions trying to gain influence during this time of just general unrest, I think is really, really fascinating. And every time we get a story around this era, I know that I'm going to eat it up. That being said, I did not love this one. Not to say that I hated it, I think that it was fine. The first issue I had with this is that it felt like there were no stakes. Every time something drastic happened, it was almost immediately rectified. I am going to give a spoiler warning here because I'm going to talk about some of the plot points in this book because I don't feel like I can give a review otherwise. So if you haven't read Aftermath yet and you want to, save this video and come back when you're done. The majority of the plot of this book revolves around a mother and son. The mother left the son when he was very young, essentially orphaning him, and throughout the book she is trying to rectify their relationship and he is not really having any of it because he's a teenager. He obviously still has positive feelings for her, he's just like a confused child who was abandoned by his only surviving parent. Instead of having them talk it out or having any real character development, in this book, the catalyst for them reconnecting their bond is her being presumed dead after flying a ship directly into a building, and him being distraught about it and then finally realizing that he's being a little bit petty, which I don't fully agree with because she orphaned him, but whatever. It just felt like such lazy writing to have that be the joining factor. I just wanted better from it. I'm not sure if this book is considered a YA book or not. If it is, it would make a little bit more sense to me. Another thing that kind of ground my gears about this book is how it's formatted. It honestly threw me off so much. I was listening to the audiobook and reading along with this, and I just couldn't keep track of what was happening. This book has parts and then chapters and then interludes. I found the interludes to be vastly more fascinating than anything happening in the main plot of this book, and I would have loved if this was maybe reimagined into a book of short stories that maybe expanded a little bit on what we saw in the interludes. One in particular that I think we see a couple times in this book is a journalist on Chandrila. I think I pronounced that correctly, sorry. Mon Mothma's a home planet. I was almost sad when we cut away from those to go back to the main plot of this book because of how much I didn't like the main plot of this book. We'll give this book its flowers. I think that the art in it is very pretty. It was an easy read. It didn't take me very long to get through at all, besides the fact that I kind of didn't want to read it, so I had to force myself to go back into it. I am interested to read the rest of the trilogy to see if it gets any better, to see if maybe the formatting changes or if the writing style improves a little bit more, but as of right now, I don't think that I will be rushing to pick up a book from this author anytime soon. The writing style just really was not for me. Definitely not my least favorite Star Wars book that I've read recently. That is still Last Shot. And that's what I thought about Aftermath. Let me know in the comments if you've read this book and what you thought about it, and tell me if you think I should continue on with the trilogy. Make sure you follow for more Star Wars content, and I will see you tomorrow when we spin the wheel for our next random book. Bye! It is once again time to spin for a random Star Wars book. If this is the first time you are seeing me or my wheel, my name is Sunny and this is my random Star Wars book wheel. We're going to spin this, have it pick a book, and we are going to read it in my book club. If you're interested in reading along, you can find the link in the comments. Let me pop on the inverted filter and then let's get to spinning. Alright, here we go. A New Dawn! Just took me a second to remember why that name was familiar to me, but oh my gosh. I am so excited to read this book. I have been waiting for this to come up on the wheel since we started this. I love Kanan and I love Hera, and it's actually very fitting that I have these nails on right now. They're very Hera coated. I'm feeling kind of bad because the last two books that we've read have both been 1 stars for me, so I'm really hoping that this is good. I think that it's going to be just purely for the fact that I love both of these characters so much. I am so beyond excited to read this. Let me pull up the synopsis and we can figure out what this book is about, because I genuinely don't have a clue. On Wikipedia, here is a little bit of information about it before I read the blurb. The New Dawn is a canon novel written by John Jackson Miller with a foreword by Dave Filoni. That is really interesting. I did not know that Dave Filoni wrote books, not like... Okay, we get it. It was the first novel to be set in the current Star Wars canon, and it serves as a prequel to the animated television series Star Wars Rebels. Here is the publisher summary. Ever since the Jedi were marked for death and forced to flee Coruscant, Kanan Jarrus has devoted himself to staying alive rather than serving the Force. Wandering the galaxy alone from one anonymous job to another, he avoids trouble, especially with the Empire, at all costs. So when he discovers a deadly conflict brewing between ruthless Imperial forces and desperate revolutionaries, he's not about to get caught in the crossfire. Then, the brutal death of a friend at the Empire's hand forces the ex-Jedi to make a choice: bow down in fear or stand up and fight. Jarrus won't be fighting alone. Unlikely allies, including a bomb-throwing radical, a former Imperial surveillance agent, a vengeful security officer, and the mysterious Hera Syndulla, an agent provocateur with motivations of her own, team up with Jarrus to challenge the Empire. As a crisis of apocalyptic proportions unfold on the planet Gorse, they must stand together against one of the Empire's most fearsome enforcers, for the sake of the world and its people. Guys, I fear that this book is going to eat. I'm going to go dive directly into this book, so I'll see you when I have my review. Bye! I just finished one of my most anticipated Star Wars books, so let's talk about it. Really quickly, if I don't look familiar to you, my name is Sunny. I have a book club where we are spinning a randomized wheel to pick our next Star Wars book. So if you're interested in joining, I'll put the link to my Fable in the comments. I have to say, by far, this has been my favorite book that we've read. Don't worry, I am going to keep the spoiler free because I think that everyone who is a Rebels fan, a general Star Wars fan, someone who doesn't know anything about Rebels, someone who particularly likes Kanan or Hera, I think everyone should go read this book. It's not that long, the font is pretty generous, and it was just such a good time. To start this off, I will say that I was already a pretty big fan of Kanan and Hera, both separately and as a couple, so I knew that I was probably going to like this book as long as the writing was good, and I'm happy to report this book, it did eat. Now, without giving any spoilers, because again, I think that you should read this book, the little bits that we get about specifically Kanan's life post Order 66 but pre-Rebels was so interesting to me. One of my favorite things to read about in the Star Wars universe are Jedi who survived the initial Order 66, like Kanan, like Cal Kestis, like Obi-Wan. I think that all of those different characters and their paths and whether or not they choose to continue living the Jedi lifestyle after Order 66 and everything that happened to them is always super fascinating to me, and I love to see the variety of past Jedi who either completely abandon the Jedi way or still take like bits and pieces of it and integrate it into their new lives as X/hidden Jedi. I always think that is so interesting. To get Kanan's story in that regard, I love so much. Kanan going into this book is already probably in my top 5, if not top 3 Jedi of all time, so I just loved every second that we got to spend with him and learning more about his backstory. One thing that I wasn't in love with in this book is how they characterized Hera. I think for the most part they did a good job, but there is definitely a little bit of that like female protagonist written by a man stink on it in my opinion, but it wasn't overwhelming. She still had other characteristics, but when it showed up it just left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth. And without any spoilers, there are 2 other characters that we see a lot in this book. I didn't really care for either of them, if I'm being completely honest, and I feel like there was a little bit too much of them in this book because it just felt like a lot of them and not enough of her. We did get a good amount of Kanan in this book. This book is definitely Kanan forward, so if that's something you're into, again, definitely pick this up. Overall, I loved this book. I absolutely flew through it. I think I got through this in like 6 hours. I was reading and listening to the audiobook at the same time, so that definitely helped. If you are an audiobook person, this one is narrated by my absolute favorite audiobook narrator of all time, Mark Thompson. And that was all for New Dawn. I know that this was super vague, but I do think that you should go read this book, so I don't want to give any spoilers. If you've read A New Dawn already, I would love to hear your thoughts on it. I know that this is in the top for a lot of people as far as Star Wars books go, so I'd love to hear what you think about it. And I will see you tomorrow when we spin for our next random Star Wars book. Bye! It is once again time to spin for a random Star Wars book. If the wheel and I don't look familiar, my name is Sunny. I have a Star Wars book club where we are spinning this wheel to determine our next random Star Wars book. If you're interested in reading along, I will leave the link to the book club in the comments. Let's pop on the inverted filter and spin the wheel. Our next book is Blackspire, the first Galaxy's Edge book. I've actually been waiting for this book to come up for so long. As you probably know if you've seen me before, I am obsessed with Galaxy's Edge, and particularly Vi, who is a Galaxy's Edge original. I actually just met her not even 2 weeks ago for the very first time, so I'm so excited that we're finally going to be able to read this book. This does leave us with a little bit of a conundrum, because I have been told that this book contains a huge spoiler for the Phasma book, which is also written by this author whose name is Delia S. Dawson. So I think what we might have to do is make this a double. I am going to read Phasma and then this book. Phasma is on the wheel, and I don't want it to be spoiled for me, so I feel like it's only fair to go read Phasma first and then read this one. I'm not sure if I'll make Phasma our next book club book. If anyone is interested in reading along, let me know in the comments, but if not, I'll probably just do it off screen and then come back. While I ruminate on that, let me read you the publisher summary. After devastating losses at the hands of the First Order, General Leia Organa has dispatched her agents across the galaxy for allies, sanctuary, and fire power. Your top spy, Vi Morty, may have just found all three on a secluded world at the galaxy's edge. A planet of lush forests, precarious mountains, and towering petrified trees. Latu is one of the first possible frontiers of the galactic map. The last little world before the mysterious expanse of wild space. The rogues, smugglers, and adventurers who eke out a living on the largest settlement of the planet, the Blackspire Outpost, are here to avoid crime and unnecessary complications. I, a resistance spy learned from the First Order, is hardly a welcome guest. And when a shuttle full of stormtroopers lands in her wake, determined to read her out, she has no idea where to find help. To survive, Vi will have to seek out the good-hearted heroes hiding in a world that redefines scum and villainy. With the help of a traitor, stupor, and her civic droid, she begins to gather a colorful band of outcasts and misfits and embarks on a mission to spark the fire of resistance on Batuu before the First Order snuffs it out entirely. I am so excited to read this book. Like I said, if you'd like me to add Phasma to the book club, let me know. If not, I'm just going to read it on its own and keep Blackspire up there. We will reconvene here in a few weeks to talk about these two books. Bye! I just finished both of these books, so let's talk about them. Super quickly, if I don't look familiar to you, my name is Sunny. I have a Star Wars book club and a random book wheel where we are choosing books to read every couple of weeks. These are the two most recent ones. If you're interested in seeing what our next one will be, make sure you press follow, and I will also leave the link to the book club in the comments in case you want to join. With that out of the way, this review is going to have spoilers for both Blackspire and Phasma, so if you are interested in reading either of these books and you don't want it spoiled for you, maybe press save and come back when you're done. I think both of these are worth reading. The book that we actually got from the wheel was this one right here, Blackspire. This is the first Galaxy's Edge novel, and it contains massive spoilers for Phasma. This is kind of a precursor to this one. It involves a lot of the same characters, including Vi Morty here, who is the main character of this story, and partially of this one as well. So I decided to read Phasma before reading Blackspire so that this book wouldn't be spoiled for me, and I am so glad that I did, because I liked this book way more than this one. So let's talk about Phasma first. This book follows Vi as she gets captured by the First Order, and the person who captures her is someone who wants dirt on Phasma because he doesn't trust her. Through this narrative, we go back and forth between Vi and her capturer as she's being tortured and pressed for information, and the story that Vi is telling about what she has heard about Phasma through a secondary source. I thought that this book was so interesting in the way that it jumps back and forth, and the way it chose to tell Phasma's story I thought was really, really cool. It definitely was something that I wasn't expecting when I picked it up. I will say, I think that I liked Vi and her torturer, his name is Cardinal in this book. I liked Vi and Cardinal a lot more in this one than I did in this one. Spoiler, they are both involved in this one as well. I just felt like they were a little bit more interesting in this one, and I will also say this book is a lot shorter than Blackspire. I found myself more interested in the Vi parts of this story than I did about the Phasma parts. I think the Phasma parts dragged a little bit, and there were times that just felt completely unnecessary, and there was a good chunk about right here in the book where they were just doing some weird stuff that I felt like was in there specifically to meet a page limit and not necessarily to further the story in any kind of significant way. I don't want to get too much into it, but it involves like a mining corporation and they like get captured. It's just like a whole thing. It's weird. I read almost all of this waiting in a doctor's office, so For that, I'm grateful for it. So going into Black Spire, I was really excited to read this book because I already loved Vi's character from meeting her in Galaxy's Edge, just knowing a little bit about her generally through my knowledge of the parks. So I was already kind of on board to like her in this book, and this book did make me like her a lot. This one, I feel like she was fine. Everyone around her was so drastically boring. Most of this book, I would describe it as close to slice of life as Star Wars can possibly get. There's so much of this book that can be described as like, Vi wakes up, Vi goes to work, Vi talks to someone, Vi goes back home with more questions than answers. A new day, Vi wakes up, Vi goes to work, Vi goes to talk to someone else. It's just so much of that. About halfway through this book, it just felt like nothing was getting better or worse. It was just flatlining. And this book is almost 600 pages long. It's 564 pages, which I think could have been halved, or if not, like a third of this could have been removed, honestly. With that being said, this book wasn't completely terrible. This was a very average read for me. One thing I really did like, and this is an actual spoiler, so again, if you're not interested in that, click away now. There is a point in this book where Cardinal, who has defected from the First Order, is like trying to figure out what his life is without the First Order because he's been there for his entire life. And there's a point in this book where it kind of feels like there is a romance about to happen between Vi and Cardinal, who isn't going by Cardinal anymore, but that's what I'm gonna call him. And Vi like immediately shoots it down and is like, no, I respect you as a person. I think that we can be friends, but I am not interested in you at all romantically. And the way that it's handled in this book is like really nice and refreshing, because even through this book, I could kind of feel that they might have been hinting at a future romance, and I am so beyond pleased that that did not end up happening, because I can't stress enough, he tortured her for like a while, and this book talks a lot about how that imprisonment infected both of them, both mentally and physically, because neither of them got out unscathed. Another thing I really did like about this book is the setting. It's no surprise that I am obsessed with Galaxy's Edge. I love everything about it. It is my favorite thing to do on Disney property, is just go and hang out in Galaxy's Edge, not necessarily do the rides or anything, but being able to step into a Star Wars world and have it be so all-encompassing and like very in-depth is something that I absolutely adore. Being able to read about like Doc-Ondars and Savis and his cantina, it was just so cool to see these characters that I'm so familiar with and be able to read about a place that I can visualize. Overall, I definitely recommend you pick up both of these books. This one was a little bit more of a slog, but if you love Galaxy's Edge or just general Star Wars lore, I think you'll enjoy this one. Phasma, I think, was genuinely a really good read, especially if maybe you're not a huge fan of the sequels. I think this will give you a new perspective on some of the characters, so maybe pick it up if you have a chance. It's not that long. I was able to get through this one super quickly. And that is what I thought about Phasma and Black Spire. If you've read either of these books, I would love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to press follow. We are spinning for our next random Star Wars book tomorrow, and you don't want to miss it. Bye!